Hello and welcome to Sacred Psychology, the podcast for misfits and mystics. Here, neuroscience and spirituality go hand in hand. Join me, Tamara Powell, on a no-holds-barred adventure outside the box, because that's where all the truly great shit happens anyway. Welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm your host, Tamara Powell. My guest today is Livingston. She's a spiritual mindset coach who teaches women the importance of self-love through self-care in order to show up authentically in the world. She's currently living a nomadic life, traveling the country with her 2 cats while she teaches, coaches, writes, and explores. And in our conversation today, we're talking about conscious parenting. You see, Anne has a background in education with a master's degree and 7 years in the classroom before she lost her job due to school closures and ended up on this wild entrepreneurial journey that she'll share more about with you in just a moment. I wanted to dive deep into this idea of our stories and how they affect the way that we interact with our children and the rippling effects outward. Guys, this was one hell of a roller coaster of a ride, and Anne was dropping mic drops left and right. You may need to put your steel toes on for this one, but I promise you it's going to hurt so good. So without further ado, I give you the one, the only, the ever incomparable Anne Livingston. Hey, Anne, welcome to the show.
We're here.
So for all the listeners, we had to do a take 2 because we lost our audio the first time. So it's exciting. Middle of Mercury retrograde, and we were recording on Lionsgate. So big deal.
It's exciting when technology works.
Yeah. We're back. So for those people who have not yet been blessed with knowing who the hell you are, will you please share a little bit about you and your journey thus far?
Sure. So my name is Anne Livingston. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a spiritual mindset coach now, but that has not always been my journey. I actually started out with my background in education. So I got my bachelor's and my master's in early childhood and special ed, and was in the classroom for 7 years teaching kindergarten and first grade, and moved from Florida to Texas to then Chicago. And in my first year teaching in Chicago, there were 50 school closures, and I ended up losing my job, like my career ultimately, right? And so it was one of those moments where you end up, like I ended up sitting on my couch sobbing for 2 weeks, like, I don't know what to do. I lost my career. After I lost that job, I sent out resume after resume after resume after resume trying to I'm highly qualified. I have all this experience. I have all this education. What I didn't realize at the time was I was too expensive to hire back. And so I sent out all these resumes, but I couldn't even get an interview because just one look at my resume and it was like, we can't afford her. So I ended up becoming a nanny for 1.5 years, but it was in my 1.5 years of becoming a nanny that I had the clarity that I no longer wanted to work for other people. Mm-hmm. I knew that as much as I love children and as great as I am with children, I didn't want that to be my forever thing. And after having lost my job, I kind of had that realization of I no longer want anyone else to have control over how much I make or whether I have a job or I want control over my career, my future. And so I had shifted a lot in my own personal life with my own nutrition and had this passion for helping other people live healthy lives. And so I actually began my entrepreneurial career starting my own meal planning business. It was like an individualized meal planning business. But then I had this realization through doing that I was limited to the amount of people I was able to serve. That I could work 40 or 50 hours a week, which is not really what I wanted to do. And I could still only help a limited amount of people. And so I was like, I'm not making the impact in the world that I want to make. And so then I shifted into network marketing. And then from there, I shifted into my own spiritual journey and realized I was in a health and wellness company and realized that a lot of people were kind of falling off this, so-called wagon that we all talk about that doesn't exist because the mindset piece, right? Like they weren't actually looking at what are my patterns? What are my patterns? What are the stories that I'm telling myself? How do I consistently fall off this wagon and fail, which I don't believe in failure, but that was their perception, right? So I realized I needed to help dig in deeper into the stories that they were telling themselves. And so I kind of jumped ship from network marketing and went solo in the spiritual mindset coaching business. And then, and really with a focus on self-love and self-care, like I really honed in on what do. I really work primarily with women, and I help them find their path to self-love through self-care. And then once I got solidified in that, I actually joined back into the network marketing community because the tools, I was like, I need tools to really offer my clients. So I went back to it after about a year of really soul searching and realizing there's nothing wrong with network marketing, and the company that I'm now with, I thoroughly enjoy, and it makes sense. It's in alignment with what I already do with my clients. So that's where I'm currently at.
So what company are you with?
I'm with Beachbody.
Ah, yeah. It's all right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Do you ever I'm sure you get a plethora of reactions to people when you tell them that you are with Beachbody.
Yeah. So I held a lot of shame around it for a while, and it's interesting. I feel like I have a different perspective that a lot of people don't necessarily have when it comes to network marketing, because I was very successful I was in it for 3.5 years and then took a year off and then came back around March of this year. And I built my business very quickly. I had success very quickly. I was in the top 0.01% of the company, doing well. Yeah, like doing well.
For it, for sure.
But it was like, I didn't understand the alignment piece of business. And I found myself kind of going through the motions, and I found myself inviting people to join my team and to work with who weren't really in alignment with who I am, right? Yeah. And who I really desire to work with. And I now understand that that is a huge piece of being successful in business, is making sure that you're working with the right people. And so after I left, I realized, like, okay, there is a way to build a network marketing business, because let's be honest, to have that residual income, to have another stream of income never hurts.
Absolutely.
And so I was like, I missed having that income. I missed having that community. That was the other thing. Being a solo entrepreneur can be extremely lonely if you don't know how to really network and connect with other people.
Sure.
It can be very, very lonely. And so going back into network marketing, it helped to have the community. It helped to have, people alongside me doing it also.
Yeah, I totally get that. So how did you overcome the shame? I know we're going down a rabbit trail, but I think this is so important for...
I know, right? Like, this is not what we had planned.
Nope. Don't care. That's how Lionsgate works. Talk about shame and self-care, woman.
Right. So the shame, I realized that I cared more about what people thought of me. So many people view network marketing as like this scam, sleazy business, right?
And unfortunately, some of those people you are not aligned with have probably, ruined the taste in their mouth.
Right. Well, because let's be honest, like, we all received those cold messages in our inbox saying, hey, girl.
Yep, still do.
Blah, 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 right? And so it's like, and I now have a lot of compassion for those people, because I'm like, I get it. I was you. I've sent the hey, girl messages. I've totally done all that. But I realized that, I was more concerned about what people thought of me. And I had family members not, thinking that I was in some scam and
pyramid scheme.
Pyramid scheme, right? And I really had to look at, okay, these products have literally changed my life. And the company is completely in alignment with how I live my life, how I work my business, who I work with, all of that. Like, it's based on self-love and self-care. Well, that's my business. So I just had to really get over what other people thought of me. And that's been, that's kind of a lifelong journey, but that's really where my, I would say where my own personal growth really began, was like finding who I am, loving who I am, finding my voice, trusting myself, and not giving a fuck what other people think of me, because it's like, it's not their life to live.
Absolutely. And I actually think this is a perfect segue for our conversation around conscious parenting, because any parent on the planet, but we're most often talking with women, moms struggle with that, I think more so than most other things.
Right.
The second that a woman decides that she's going to even have a child, automatically other people are having opinions. Are you going to have a natural birth, a home birth, a water birth? Are you going to breastfeed or bottle feed? Are you going to circumcise or not circumcise? I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And that shame piece, the self-consciousness piece, is, I think, one of the first things that starts to take a woman away from her own intuition and ability to be a conscious parent. Would you agree?
For sure. And so one thing you asked me before we did this was, do you work with moms? And that's kind of how this topic of conscious parenting has come up for me, because it was not my intention. I wasn't like, okay, and I'm going to work with moms and I'm going to talk about conscious parenting. Like, that was not, that's not how business works. Like, you all of a sudden get that like intuitive nudge of like, and this is what you're talking about now. And you're like, okay, cool. Thanks for the heads up.
Right.
And so conscious parenting has been coming up. But yeah, I have a lot of moms who work with me, and I had to kind of sit back and reflect and ask myself, like, why do moms come to, I'm not a mom, I'm a single lady on the road with cats, why do moms want to come to me to work with me?
Right.
And I mean, yes, I have the educational background, but I also don't talk about it a lot. Like, that's not something that I publicly share, just because for me, it seems like a completely different part of my life. And now I realize, like, oh, I needed that experience because I now bring it into my coaching. But I was just talking to a client the other day who's on her second pregnancy, and she's like, I'm struggling because, of course, I'm grateful to be pregnant. Of course, I'm excited about having this baby. But like, there are women out there who are like, they love being pregnant, and I don't love being pregnant. And so she was judging herself for not loving being pregnant. I was like, can you just love where you're at and accept that you don't love being pregnant? And that's okay. Like, it's okay to not love being pregnant. I don't know what it feels like, but it's okay to not love being pregnant. And you know what? Like, you don't even have to love being a mom every day. I'm sure there are days where you don't love being a mom, and it's okay. You can love yourself anyway.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying that to a woman yesterday. Motherhood is fucking hard.
Yeah.
Even when I planned both of mine, and I think there's those stories that you were talking about before really vary from woman to woman or parent to parent, father to father, absolutely, as to why it can be so difficult. I think we each have a love-hate relationship for anything that puts restrictions, and having a child is definitely
yep.
Even having cats, girl, there's
you're like, let's talk about you being a fur mom.
Yes, I mean, totally. I know it's a thing. I love animals as long as they're at your house, not mine.
And I love children as long as they don't inhibit my freedom. So there we go.
There we go. But those stories that we tell ourselves that then cause that self-consciousness and the shame. Tell me more about how you started to notice these themes popping up, and why conscious parenting for you is now a little bit of a passion.
Right. So a lot of the women who I work with also really struggle with perfectionism. Of course, pops up as being
raising my hand.
Right. And I tell my clients, like, I call myself a recovering perfectionist, because I still have moments where I have to catch myself. I don't think it's ever fully healed. I think there's still moments where ego's like, you should be perfect. And you're like, damn it, there it is again. Yeah. But when I started to work with more and more clients, and we really started to dig into perfectionism, like, where does that come from? Like, and I know Brene Brown talks about this, but like, where does perfectionism really come from? And what I realized is that if you think of it, like, so if you go back to your childhood and realize, like, when did I decide, or when was that message given to me that I need to be perfect? Well, I think it has to do with how rules and boundaries are set up, right? Mm-hmm. So like, parents set boundaries and rules. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be rules or there shouldn't be boundaries, but I think it's interesting to look at. So
yeah, I love where this is going. Keep going.
Right? So like, parents set up rules and boundaries, and then we get rewards or consequences based on whether you follow the rules or stay within the boundaries. Now, I'm someone that has struggled so hard to step outside of the box, because there has been this punishment growing up that if I stepped outside of the box, if I crossed boundaries, there were consequences, and I was punished for being myself. So this is what we teach children. As long as you stay in the box, then you are loved. if you step outside of the box and you cross the boundaries, there are consequences, which feels to a child like it is a withholding of love. Now, I know that's not what parents mean. You know, right. It's like I look at my upbringing, and I wouldn't say that like my parents weren't consciously trying to send the message that love was conditional, but that's the message that we send children. Love is conditional.
Right, based on the parents' stories and their parents' stories. And so we've got this long line of operant conditioning, right? That punishment and reward system.
Right.
That is, if we're not careful, a very unconscious subliminal message being delivered over and over and over. And so talk to me about how you see this show up in the women you work with down the road, because now we've got these children grown up having their own babies. And It sounds like the cycle picks back up. And for some of your clients, thank God they're finding you, they're realizing, oh shit, I don't want to legacy.
Yeah. So I think that you will probably agree with this. Like therapy and coaching are different, right? They're different in the way that we work with clients. And so I tell my clients, like, I'm not a therapist, right? So I don't necessarily dig into the past the way that a lot of therapists do. However, I do believe that looking at patterns from the past, looking at how you were raised, is important to look at that in order to figure out what stories are you consistently telling yourself.
Bingo.
And so, we do look at, well, how were you raised and what comes up there? So I have a lot of women who will say, well, this is how I was brought up. Well, we were modeled, right, how to parent from our parents. And so if we don't then have or change or become aware of certain things, then we pass that down to our children. And I tell women who I work with, as far as like the self-care piece, for instance, because there's a lot of moms out there who say like, well, I don't have the time to work out or take care of myself, or my children come first. I'm like, hold on a second. You are modeling to your child what it looks like to either show up for yourself or not show up for yourself. You are modeling to your child what it looks like to either value yourself or devalue yourself. Like every action that you take, every word that comes out of your mouth, everything is being modeled to your children. And so, what? No pressure? Yes. This is why I teach it. I don't have the children.
Keep going though. I love it.
Yeah. So, I'm just like, now is the time when you break the cycle. And I believe that because I'm a cycle breaker in my own family, that it's why I teach cycle breaking to my clients.
Oh, for sure. So what were some of the cycles that were hardest for you? Which ones were your tender spots?
My hardest ones were learning how to speak my truth unapologetically.
Ooh.
Like that was a really hard one for me. And there's still moments, right, where it's like I will start to speak my truth and I will feel my entire body shaking. Like I have a visceral reaction sometimes to speaking my truth, because it's this, are you going to be punished? Are you going to be shunned? Are you, are you going to still be accepted? Because because exactly, like the thing is, and I've taught some parents, when your child acts out, when your child's acting out, they oftentimes don't know how to communicate to you. Right? They are experiencing feelings and they don't have the words for what those feelings are. And ultimately, at their core, what they really want is to feel love, accepted, and validation.
Right.
Oh. Love, acceptance, and validation. And because we don't teach children, and again, I teach it to moms so they can teach it to their children. Children don't know how to love, accept, and validate themselves because we haven't taught that to them. And so they're always looking to something external to help them feel loved, accepted, and validated.
And it's just fascinating to me as a therapist and coach myself is like taking that ripple effect outward and noticing, like, don't you think so many of the world's greater difficulties could be solved if we could get this shit right here?
Girl, you are speaking my language.
Like, don't you think Trump on his toilet twittering, tweeting the world, if that boy could have gotten some love and validation for
seriously though, I've been saying this shit for like a couple years now, that every single issue we see in our current world would be 100% obliterated if we really understood the importance of self-love and learned how to do it.
Yes, and that it's not just, chocolates and bubble baths.
No. It's not.
Damn it.
No. I'm like so fired up right now.
Good. I tend to have that effect on people. It's great.
It's not though, because, I have conversations with, women, prospective clients, and my first question always, because it's like, we want to blame the external circumstances, right? Victim mentality because
always
of external circumstance, right? Like, this is why I feel this way. This is why my life is this way. I have no control over blah 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 blah. And the first question I always ask is, what are you doing to show up for yourself?
Ooh.
What are you doing to take care of yourself? Like, that is the first question I always ask everyone. And then sometimes I hear like, well, I watch TV and I get a pedicure, and I'm like, that's all fine and good, but like, I want to know, how are you nourishing your body, mind, and soul? Because if you're not nourishing all three aspects, body, mind, and soul, you're out of balance.
And again, why aren't we teaching this in kindergarten? I mean, it's great. We are starting to see some mindfulness-based programs making their way into the classroom and et cetera, but not enough. I'm still arguing we could be doing a fuck ton better.
100%. And honestly, like, as someone who's been in the classroom, who's very grateful to not be in the classroom anymore, I mean, that was the best thing that ever could have happened to me. But I know that there are a lot of people out there, obviously, still in the educational system. And when you're in it, it feels like a shit show. And it feels like, if only we could have, this fixed or this fixed. But the truth is that it's just Band-Aids being slapped on shit all the time. And I know that right now it looks like chaos and it looks like shit's just exploding. But the truth is that in order to rebuild something that is completely different, we need to let the chaos happen. Like, we need to let the educational system crumble as it is so that we can rebuild something that has never been built before.
The perfectionist in me is like, but fearing at the same time. I'm having a very dualistic internal conflict right now. That's hard.
Yeah.
And I think that very much so mirrors the internal experience of what you're talking about. I would venture to guess that your work with women and helping them find the self-care through self-love, which then leads to conscious parenting, is a very similar process. There's some things that she's probably going to have to burn some bridges down and rebuild.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, women have to get rid of their excuses, as to why they feel they can't do certain things. Whether it's a schedule conflict or my kids won't let me. Like, you have to, moms, you have to stop blaming your kids. You have to stop blaming your kids for why you're not showing up for yourself.
God damn it, Ann.
You're like, why did I ever agree to have you on anyway?
Just kidding. It hurts so good. Keep it going.
You have to stop blaming your kids for why you're not showing up for yourself, because again, that's what you're modeling them. You're modeling to them it's someone else's fault for why I'm not happy. It's someone else's fault for why I'm not taking care of myself. It's someone else's fault why I feel like shit. It's your responsibility. And when you take your power back and really start, like, I know I have moms out there who have really young children, right? Who are like, but my child is 1, my child is 2.5. Now I get that. I have, like I said, I've nannied, I've worked in preschools. Like, I've worked the variety of age groups, and I understand that age group really well. I love the 2-year-old phase. But I say it again because I don't have my own 2-year-old. Yeah. But no, I love 2-year-olds, like 1.5, between 1.5 and like 3. I love that age group. The thing is, like, kids do struggle with transition, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. So if you just talk to them like they're a human being and explain to them, like, this is important for mom. Mom is doing this for herself right now, and you can either join me or do something else. You can play next to me while I'm working out, but I'm going to show up for myself. And it doesn't matter how long it takes for that workout to finish, or get daycare or whatever it is. Right. There's always a way for it to work. But if you tell yourself, I can't because, ego is always going to come up with all the reasons that's true. But if you ask yourself, how can I make this work? You'll figure out a way.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah. Let's talk about that for another second. That's another
okay.
So the ego, the psyche will always find ways to prove itself right. Like that self-fulfilling prophecy, I think it's so flippantly dismissed at times. I often will, tell people over and over that our brains are kind of like 3D printers for our reality.
Yeah.
The brain, we've known through psych research, loves to prove itself right more than it likes everything else, including being liked. This
right.
So early, even in the high chair, we've learned you hand a kiddo in the high chair a toy. What's the first thing they do? They fucking drop the thing. we used to assume before research that they were testing and somehow manipulating the parent. It turns out that what they actually are doing are attempting to prove themselves right. They would rather be without the toy than to be wrong. It's
wow. I don't think I knew that. That's awesome.
Human behavior. I love this component that you're raising awareness to once again, that when moms or dads are walking around giving themselves these excuses, we will find a way to make that true.
For sure.
It starts before we open our eyeballs to get out of bed in the morning.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
I love that you're pushing us to look at those stories.
Yeah, so this morning is a perfect example because, I think sometimes people think that for a coach like me that, preaches and teaches and coaches on self-love and self-care, it must just be so easy for me, it just comes so naturally. Hell no. No, I'm still a human being. So this morning I woke up and I had already planned this morning I was going to go for a run. So I'm in Phoenix right now. It's fucking hot here.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm going to go for a run. So I wake up this morning and at first I was excited, right? Because I do enjoy running. So I was like, I'm going to go for a run. And then all of a sudden I checked the weather and it was 87 degrees, 55% humidity. Now it's not so much the heat, but the humidity that kills me when I'm running. Mm-hmm. So I looked at that humidity and I was like, I don't really need to go for a run today. And so I just observed my thoughts. And this is a big piece of it, right? And this is why I tell my clients they have to meditate. They have to meditate on a daily basis because it's the observance of your thoughts. So I observed what I was thinking. I noticed that I was thinking, I don't need to go for a run today. I worked out the last 2 days and technically today is kind of a rest day. So I'm doing this program right now that's 4 days of weightlifting, but it gives me the freedom to do things like run on the other days. So I was trying to talk myself out of it saying it's kind of a rest day. So you could technically just rest and not go for a run. And, I started down that path of all the reasons I didn't want to do it. And then I just stopped myself and told myself a different story. Okay, well, no, actually, I want to go for a run today. And I know that it's only going to take 30 minutes. I don't have to run longer than 30 minutes. And I've done this before, so I know I can do it again. And I ran a marathon last year, so this is a piece of cake compared to that. It's just I started to look at all the reasons it was not a big deal. And then once I got there, I was putting on my shoes and out the door. But it's always a choice.
Mm-hmm. And we have to be conscious of that. Hence the conscious parenting thing. It's, do you even know what you're telling yourself right now?
Right.
So your child's losing his or her shit in public. Why is that bothering you? Because that'll be very different parent to parent. And once you are conscious of that story, then you can change it, is what I'm hearing. And I would so agree.
Yep. And I think a lot of times too, I say our children, but
our collective children.
Our collective children, my cats included.
Yes.
Our children are reflecting back to us how we're feeling inside. And so when your children are being super chaotic and negative and fighting and bickering and it's triggering you in that way, I tell my clients where you're triggered is where the work is.
Yep. As much as we hate it. Yep.
Yeah. If it's triggering you, there's your work. Congratulations. You won a prize. And so your kids are always reflecting back to you what's really going on within you.
Yeah, that's powerful. So give us some practical tools from the cases that you've seen. How does a woman really find her happy optimization as a conscious parent?
Well, it starts with self-care. So where I start all of my clients is with having some sort of morning routine. And I tell them, there are certain things you have to do, but as far as like the specifics within those categories, I don't really care. So you have to move your body in some way, shape, or form every single day. Now, if it's a rest day, I don't care if you go for a leisurely walk. I don't care if you stretch. I don't care if you do yoga. I don't care. But move your body in some way, shape, or form every single day in a way that feels good. Like if you say you hate to work out, then you haven't found the right workout. There are so many ways to move your body that are enjoyable. There's something out there for you. The second thing is that you have to meditate. And again, like I think that there are pros to guided meditation, and I think there are pros to silent meditation. I think that there are benefits to both. And I don't really care what they do as long as they're doing something. I think that the benefits to silent meditation, though, is that that's where you really begin to observe your thoughts. And I hear so often, well, Anne, I can't meditate because I can't get my mind to stop. Well, congratulations, you're a human being.
Kind of the point, actually.
Yeah, right. Your thoughts are never going to fully stop, because you're alive. But they do start to slow down the more you do it. So you're not a failure ever, but you're not a failure because you sit down and your thoughts won't stop. Like, congratulations, you're at the beginning. Like it sounds about right. You're on the right path. And then the third thing that I have all my clients do is to help themselves nourish their soul is I have them create a list of 10 things that bring them joy that don't require money or other people.
Ooh, that's good.
And then they just choose something from that list every single day. And it could be something as simple as like sitting on the deck with a cup of coffee.
It's one of my faves. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, who doesn't love to be outside, Going for a walk, going for a drive, listening to music, cooking, reading. Like there's so many things out there that can bring you joy that don't, and I would say a fairly recovered codependent, right? So I was so dependent for so long.
I appreciate your vulnerability.
That like I had a lot of coaches working with me saying like, what brings you joy, Anne? I was like, oh no. And again, that's a big thing with moms. Moms have forgotten who they are. So they don't know what brings them joy. And so just even sitting down and reflecting on, wow, can I list 10 things that bring me joy that don't require my partner, that don't require my kids, that don't require money? That in itself is like, that alone will change your life.
Yeah, I agree. And it really fosters independence and autonomy and confidence. And what's up, it really takes us all the way back to kindergarten, what we should be teaching kiddos, how to self-soothe and ways to feel autonomous and not codependent on someone else.
Right.
Because, that also teaches if I need somebody else to calm me down, then they're responsible for my happiness. Mm-hmm. That's not a good place to be.
No, and I would say that a lot of moms feel that they need their children as much as their children need them. Like it's a completely codependent relationship.
Girl, no, you didn't. You're going to have to unpack that a little bit more. I know where you're going, but...
I'm like calling everyone out today, aren't I?
Yeah. It's all right. It's the Leo energy. Roar, girl, roar. So tell me, why do you feel that moms need their kiddos as much as their kiddos need their moms?
I would say that there are a lot of moms out there that never fully ask the question, why do I want a child? Yeah. And I think that there are a lot of moms out there, and I know that I'm probably like really digging in, and I get it. I'm sure that some of the things I'm saying are quite painful. However, I think it's important to reflect on, and not like, oh shit, I have a child and I never thought about it. Like, you're not changing anything now, but I think it's important to look at, why did I have a child? A lot of moms out there, I think, choose to have children because I think it's expected of women, right? Who are you if you don't want to have a child? Mm-hmm. And so that's where I was for a really long time. I was married and divorced, and I was in other relationships, and I just really thought I wanted children because I love them and I'm really good with them and I know a lot about them. Until I had that realization, no, I don't want children.
Mm-hmm.
And owning that was not the easiest thing. Because again, I had like my mom saying, well, maybe you just think you don't want children because you just had a breakup. And I'm like, no, I don't want children. Like, I'm pretty clear on that now. But a lot of women don't question that. We just kind of go along with what we think it's like the next step, right? You get married and you have children, or you love someone and you have children, and it feels really normal. But a lot of times women have children to either fix a relationship, fix a marriage, or because they feel such a lack of love that they are like, at least I have this human being that will love me.
Right. So say a woman did start out on that path. Now what? Now that she's already had the baby, how do we start to heal that story and move it forward?
I think first owning it, right? Acknowledging and acknowledging and like having grace with yourself.
Yes.
Like realizing that if that is your story, there's nothing wrong with you for having that story. Like you're not broken. There's nothing to fix. But just realize that there was a lack of love. And so now I go on the journey of learning how to love myself. And again, like I fully believe that the way we learn how to love ourselves is by taking care of ourselves. Because no one else is ever going to take care of you the way that you take care of yourself. And so
couldn't help it.
I mean, it's just so good, right?
I mean, I think it's a prime example of,
yeah,
with my sexuality, that's sometimes where we start. Yeah.
That's another area where a lot of women have a lot of shame, right? I mean, so we've just kind of been taught to like not take care of ourselves.
Right.
Make it someone else's responsibility. And to take care of someone else, like to not take care of ourselves and take care of someone else.
Yeah, how exhausting is that? If it's
right.
Day out for year upon year upon year.
Yeah.
And so I have such a love-hate relationship with those words, self-care, self-love. They almost have become desensitized for us. And so I'm really intrigued that you're on this radical journey to take them back, to reappropriate them.
Yeah.
And so if you'll humor me, give me some of the punch behind those that I can love them again. Like, help me, Anne. Help me like those words again.
Well, I guess I'm curious, like, what annoys you about that? Like, what comes up for you? When you hear self-love and self-care, what does come up for you?
The pretty girl Barbie, airy-fairy branding, it's become a buzzword. And I think my inner rebel just doesn't like that part already. But then secondly, I think it gets whitewashed. I think it's also steeped in just entitlement, privilege, and just it's been overly marketed to the bubble baths and the manicures. And I think it's lost its punch that, like I said, and part of it's society's fault. We don't teach it. I don't think women really know how to take care of themselves, like you've been saying this whole podcast. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about that, I think about the word God.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
Like, I mean, I, as a spiritual mindset coach, I work with a lot of women also on their relationship with God, spirit, source, universe. I don't care what you call it. It's the same thing, right? Your higher self, your higher power. But I also had like I pushed away God and religion and spirituality for a really long time. Like, my dad's a retired minister. I grew up in the church. I was the one child that didn't get confirmed because I didn't believe in God. So I like laugh. I'm like, how the fuck did I end up a spiritual mindset coach? Like this, and also like, I know this is kind of a side note, but when people say like, I want to find my calling, I want to find my purpose, I'm like, trust me, it'll find you. Like I did not plan this shit.
Good point.
But I work with a lot of women who have spiritual pain as well. And like the word God makes them want to vomit, and I'm like, okay, I get that. Right. So I really teach them through experience. Like I help them heal their relationship with the word God through experience, because as they show up for themselves, as they meditate, as they feel these intuitive nudges, as they hear the whispers from their soul, like they have that experience and And therefore it like really becomes integrated into their life. And then I'm like, that's God. Like that you're experiencing, that's God. That's all it is. And so you may still feel, a little bit of nausea when you hear the word, but you now have this experience with this loving energy. That's all it is.
Yeah, I love it because you're really turning the industry on its head, and that's what I think attracts me to you and the work that you do. The fact that you are experiential based, the fact that you are behaviorally based rather than cognitive or feels. I think is important and would make me sit up a little straighter and take notice of like, oh, she's not just talking, let's just sit here and meditate and sing Kumbaya, and I'm supposedly going to get up and love myself and my children more as a result.
Well, and I think part of it too is that anyone who, I hate to use the word follower, like follows me, because like I don't want to be a leader in that way. I want people, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to lead and have people be like, oh, you're so.
But
like,
semantics, what they are.
Right. It's like when people say like, you inspire me, and they don't do anything with their lives. I'm like, then I don't fucking care how I inspire you if you're not changing anything. That's not why I'm here. But I think that as far as, people who learn from me, right? So learners, people who learn from me, who have seen my work, who have experienced me in any way, shape, or form, I think that just by them experiencing how I talk about it, and the fact that I am very blunt and honest, and I'm going to speak my truth, that already changes the dynamic of the word self-love and self-care, because I talk about it in a way that's very different than a lot of other people do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not so airy-fairy Barbie, thank God.
Right.
It's important because there is, like where I was mentioning before the call, a lot of pushback, and I think in some cases for good reason regarding the coaching industry is booming, and there's a lot of pros and cons to that. It's an unregulated industry, and I'm part of it, so I am happy. That's one of the reasons I'm a part of it, because therapy is overly restricted. But within the coaching industry, there's those two words, self-care, self-love, get tossed around probably like every other sentence.
Right.
And when that happens, they can tend to lose a lot of their inherent meaning. It can get semantical, and yet it is so crucial, as you and I were saying. It's the key to undoing probably war, poverty, classism. Yep. So I am so happy that we're having this conversation to give people a chance to be like, what is my story around these words? What do I want to do with that? How does that impact my parenting, etc.? Because that's the next generation. So when you're talking about conscious parenting, what do you truly mean by that? Tease that apart for me a little bit more.
So I feel like when I talk about conscious parenting, and again, this is like a new topic that's recently come up for me just because, I don't know why, but it's just been like and you now talk about this. I'm like, okay. So I'm still in the beginning stages of like, what does that really look like? But I believe that conscious parenting is understanding, like having the awareness of your own stories, your own beliefs, and understanding that your child is an individual. Like your child is separate from you, not in the same way that like ego says we're all separate, but like your child has their own desires.
Fully autonomous.
Yes.
No matter what you say or do.
Right. Like your child has their own personality, their own passion, their own belief, and their own journey, their own path. And I think that so often, and this is not just with children, but with people in general, but obviously we're talking about conscious parenting, so often we try to control and dictate how we think someone else's journey and path should go based on our own experience. And that's not your job. Mm-hmm. Your job is not to dictate and control how your child lives their lives.
Oh, so good. Yeah. I once heard a quote that basically said something like, even though your child comes through you and is birthed through you, even in the womb, they were never yours. Like they do not belong to you.
Yes.
And that has always stuck with me. Like you feel honored and privileged that you were the conduit for this being to come into the planet, but they were being autonomous of you the whole time.
Yeah.
And so you started with us with modeling and relearning how to love ourselves. And that starts with exploring our stories. Then what? How else can we help this autonomous being have a much better experience and give them a better start to life?
Well, I think it depends on the age of the child, obviously. But I've seen like parents with younger children really having open conversations, like treating even your toddler like another human being.
Mm-hmm.
Modeling language, modeling behavior, explaining why you're doing something.
Yes.
Instead of just, I think that so many parents have this, because I said so, because I'm the parent.
Authoritarian, yep.
Yeah, and it's like you are not here to teach your child is here to teach you.
Oh, there's another mic drop.
So like, pay attention. What is your child trying to teach you? And when your child triggers you, that's typically when you want to have more control over your child because it makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yep, distress intolerance
Mm-hmm.
is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is so good, Anne.
And then as far as your older children, really have open conversations with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be open and vulnerable with your children. You don't have to know shit all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that your child is not here to make you feel a certain way. Like, you can take ownership of your feelings without blaming it on your child. Having an open discussion with your children about what you're experiencing and really opening that pathway for what they're experiencing as well.
I love that. It just feels very sacred to me, which is kind of where I want to go as we start to wind down, is where do you find the sacred coming into this spiritual relationship between parent and child?
Say that again.
Here we go. We're retrograde. Yes. I'm like, this is really, but I so get it. So, so with the relationship, right, between parent and child, you're telling me that it is not just this, basic relationship like the rest of the world sees it, that when we can take it from the unconscious to the conscious side of parenting, there has to be a shift. And I'm wondering if you can describe that for me a little bit. What do you find to be sacred about that particular relationship?
When it comes to really having that type of relationship with another human being, but of course a child in this instance, it really boils down to unconditional love. Feels like you just want that other person to be happy. Like, you do not need anything from them. You love them so much that whatever brings them joy ultimately brings you joy, because you're already full of joy and love and happiness. And the only way to get there is to be overflowing with love. The only way to have unconditional love for another human being is to be overflowing with love. And the only way to get there is to fill yourself full of love first.
There it is. That is so beautiful. I just, swoon. That gives me so much to ponder. That's the whole idea of, filling our cup first. And when it is absolutely overflowing, it's just a natural space then. It's kind of what the Buddhists call a sangarikachita. It's just a natural, spontaneous right action for
right
moment that you're not having to strive for. The Taoists would say you're just in the flow.
Yep.
Girl, you are, just,
Oh, thank you.
Where can people go to find you if they want to hang out with you and learn more and get their story straight?
Yeah, so my website is annelivingstoncoaching.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at AnnLivCoaching.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Thanks for
listening to the Sacred Psychology Podcast. I pray you found some inspiration and empowerment to go out and make this life the most fulfilling possible. You can follow Sacred Psychology on Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Tag us on social media and let us know what you think as well. Please note that the information provided is not meant to convey professional, psychological, or medical advice. If you could use such services, I highly recommend seeking them out from someone you trust. To get in touch with me personally or to see how we might work together, please check out ariatherapy.com or talesfromatrapezoid.com. Until next time, everyone.